So the next macronutrient that we're going to look at is protein. And protein is probably one of the most popular macronutrients now because of the change from the low-fat diets to the high protein. And protein's usually looked upon as this superior macronutrient because it is the basis of tissue building, and it is an essential nutrient. So there are proteins that you absolutely need to get in your diet, but these form the important parts of that we focus on of the body, like the muscle tissue, almost all the tissue, all the muscles and bones, as well as the blood, enzymes, hormones, as we talked about from before, peptides, cell membranes, and in extreme situations, the body can use them for energy and convert it to carbohydrate for the glucogenic ones, and then some of them can be turned into ketones from the ketogenic. Any excess protein that the body can't use is going to be converted to sugar or ketones, and any excess that it can't use from that is going to be stored as body fat. So it's not one of these macronutrients that you can eat unlimited. It's just that it tends to be used for tissue protein. And I'll post a study within the Blackboard shell, but they look at that per meal, your body can only synthesize about 20 grams of protein. And that's per a 70 kilogram individual. So if you're a little bit bigger, that's 150 pounds. If you're 200 pounds, you might be able to process maybe 25 or 26, but 0.25 per kilogram of body weight is all the protein that you really can process at any given time, right? Because you're limited by the anabolic state. So before we get into more detail, let's look at the proteins themselves. Proteins are amino acids. So these are the smallest aspects, and these are nitrogen-containing molecules. So basically a sugar that has had nitrogen added to it, modified, and you have 20 different amino acids. So total amino acids that make up all of the proteins that exist within your body. There are 9 essential amino acids, so those are the ones that are in dash, and you don't have to memorize all these. Just realize that there's 20 amino acids. There's 9 essential. There are some that are considered conditionally essential, things that the body can make, but they're not very good at making them. So these are things that are sometimes done in supplemental form. Branched chain amino acids the body uses for energy. And yeah, these are plentiful in the proteins that we eat, particularly if you're eating animal proteins. And so there are some supplement manufacturers that will sell each of these amino acids individually. And again, maybe the conditionally essential might be beneficial, but these are things you can look up. But for the most part, you want to think of the amino acids as the building blocks, and think of it as Legos. You had 20 different Lego pieces, and from that, you're able to build any structure you can imagine, right? You're a master builder, and you build whatever out of those 20 pieces. And this is how proteins are formed, is you take those 20 pieces and you put them in certain orders, and based on the order at which they are presented, they form certain functional aspects. So you actually have quite a bit of diversity within that. You actually have a huge amount of diversity. When you think about it, you know, the 20 amino acids that make up all the proteins of the human body and most of them on the planet. What's interesting is you think of DNA, and you only have 4 amino acids that make up all the genetic life on this planet. All the blueprints are made up from those 4 amino acids. And so those same 4 amino acids are used in, plus the other 16 for the 20 amino acids to make basically all the proteins that you can think of. So everything from your body is made up of these 20 different proteins. And we get these from the foods that we eat. And proteins have these different structures. They have like a primary structure, secondary, tertiary. And this is not that important, but just like when you take an egg white, which is a certain amount of proteins, and you start to cook it, you start to denature the protein. So what's happening is you're taking these proteins that are present this, and you start to unfold them, and they start to go from this really nice shape, complex, to this like translucent where you can't see through it anymore because of that denaturing process. And denaturing happens via heat. It happens very acidic environments. That's where ceviche comes from. You can take the protein and basically cook it in the citric acid or the acid from that. So anyways, that's the denaturing aspect. And some argument whether protein should be considered raw or cooked. And again, that's what stomach acid does to the proteins, is it's part of the digestion process. You need to unfold these proteins to be able to get down, because what the body's going to do, it's going to start to cleave off these individual amino acids. It's like you built a car out of Legos, and the body needs to reformate that car into a liver. It's going to break those proteins down, and then take those bricks and make whatever proteins it needs, tissues it needs from those amino acids. You have this quantification or qualification of proteins that are considered complete or incomplete. And what complete proteins are are foods that contain all 9 essential amino acids. And so these are almost all animal products. Soy protein, quinoa, and hemp tend to have all 9 amino acids. Now they might have them in different ratios, but they're all there nonetheless. And there's nothing that you say that you need to get these in a certain meal, just you need to get these 9 amino acids at some point, and they can be done over several meals. And so when you look at beans, which are another high protein source, these are considered an incomplete protein. They have 7 of the essential amino acids, but they're missing methionine and tryptophan. Then you look at grains, they're missing tryptophan, threonine, and lysine, right? So there are different amino acids that are missing from different components, so nuts and seeds. And then you can complement protein. So let's say you're following a vegan or vegetarian diet. Depending upon how you eat, you can eat legumes and you can compensate for the lack of that from nuts and seeds and so forth. The only problem with this, if you're getting most of your protein requirements from plant sources, you are increasing your carbohydrate intake quite a bit for that. And so that's where the animal sources of protein become the optimal. But as we'll find out, you don't need that much protein in order to get by, as long as you have enough carbohydrate and fat coming in. The adequate protein intake, and most people in the United States are getting this easily, is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And that's roughly 50 grams for like a 170 pound person. The recommendation is between 10 to 35% of total protein for your calories. Your sedentary individuals probably only need 10%, and you're really active. Now, really active, not just people that, but you're like your endurance athletes that are beating the hell out of their bodies, they need 35%. Like I said, your body can only process like 0.25 kilograms of protein per meal. And so this whole aspect of the more protein you eat, the better you're going to be. I mean, if that guy ate all that steak, each of those steaks has probably 60 grams of protein. His body's only processing a quarter of that. The rest of that's going to be converted to sugar and fat, and that's really expensive sugar that you have on your table there. So when you look at your protein requirements, it's not as much as you think they are. Now, protein has become a big deal because protein manufacturers from protein powders have tried to push it, and they want to sell their product and then put like 200 grams of protein, 300 grams of protein. If you have enough fat and enough carbohydrate coming in, you don't need the protein. Your body is limited to how much it can process, and why waste all that money on that product or this high expensive quality meat? So when you look at your protein requirements, like each egg has about 6 grams. 3 ounces of meat is about 20 grams of protein, so that chicken breast and that salmon fillet are 3 ounces. Now that's not normal. I mean, I think about how much I eat. I'll eat like 3 or 4 chicken breasts or a big steak, but you can see that you're easily getting the requirements. But about 3 ounces of meat is all your body can process in one given time. Now, I'm not saying that you don't eat less than 3 ounces of meat. Like I'm going to pound a steak like this all day. I'm not anticipating that from the protein, but I'm also not eating steak for the protein. I'm eating steak for the fat that's coming along with it. And it's very hard for you to find high quality protein sources that don't also have a high quality fat source. But just to put it in perspective, if all you need is about 50 grams of protein a day, one 10-ounce steak is more than enough that you need for that. Protein is important. We need to try to get it as much as we can within our diet, but it's definitely not used for fuel if you have enough carbohydrate or fat coming in. Now remember this slide, this is looking at blood glucose levels. Keep in mind that carbohydrate is the highest insulin producing macronutrient. Protein is also insulin producing. So it produces insulin because when you eat protein, your body releases another hormone called glucagon, and you need to balance out the sugar response you're going to get from that. Glucagon helps break down protein, but it also increases amino acids and fats into the circulatory system, and so insulin's also released at the same time to bring that down, which is a benefit because you're going to start shuttling those amino acids into the cells. You want to get it just enough protein to satisfy your amino acid, your tissue growth from the training that you're doing, but you want to try to minimize your excess protein because it's expensive, and it's eventually going to end up as carbohydrate and then eventually fat, and it's not really doing us any benefit. Like I had shared, the body prefers not to use protein as a fuel source, right? And it can serve other functions in the body. So as long as you have that sufficient carbohydrate or fat, the body will not use it as a fuel source. It won't break it down. It will only do it in long duration stress, so either long starvation, multiple days, or hours of conditioning exercise. It is the most metabolically costly in terms of converting protein into ATP. It actually, protein is really like 3.5 calories per gram, and it costs maybe 2 calories to convert it, so you're only getting 1.5 calories from it. So it's not really that big of a aspect, but it will use it. And your protein storage, the amount of protein you can eat, is really limited by the anabolic growth of the lean body mass. So when you eat proteins, so here are just 2 sample essential amino acids. Those amino acids are stored in the muscle tissue, and that muscle tissue will grow and get bigger, and again, you're limited by the anabolic growth, but keep in mind that more protein doesn't drive anabolic growth. Once it hits its limit, all of that is now converted to sugar or glucose, and then the body then does what it needs with the glucose. It can either take the glucose and store it as glycogen, or it takes the glycogen or glucose, and if it's already saturated at the liver and the muscle, it's going to store it as body fat. So protein doesn't necessarily need to be maximized, it needs to be optimized. And any excess protein is a waste of money, and it is converted to the aforementioned components.